Pause for just a moment. Not for inspiration, not for motivation, just for truth. What if the life you're waiting for is never going to arrive on its own? What if the reason nothing has changed yet isn't bad luck, bad timing, or bad people, but the fact that you're still waiting for permission to begin? This might be uncomfortable to hear, but it could be the most freeing realization of your entire life. No one is coming to save you. Now, really look around you. Not in a poetic or dramatic way, but in a grounded, honest way. Look at your phone in your hand. Look at the door you walk through every day. Look at the calendar, quietly flipping page after page. And then look at the same problems you've been carrying year after year, almost like they've become part of who you are. Let this land without decoration. No one is coming to rescue you. Not a mentor who suddenly understands you perfectly. Not a flawless partner who fixes your emotional patterns. Not a lucky break that magically transforms your discipline overnight. Not a new job that suddenly gives you purpose. Not a friend who finally says the exact sentence that heals all your wounds. Not even a future version of you who wakes up one day feeling confident, focused, and ready. If your life is going to change, it will only be because you decide to change it. And yes, that sentence can sound harsh. But it only feels harsh if you're still holding on to the fantasy. Because there's a place. Many people live without realizing it. It's not a city. It's not a house. It's not even a real location. It's a mental room. A waiting room. And inside that waiting room, you keep telling yourself the same comforting stories. After this stressful period ends, after I get past this situation, after someone helps me. But here's the truth. Most people never confront. You're not waiting for the right timing. You're waiting for rescue. You're waiting for life to become easy enough, calm enough, safe enough, so that you can finally act like the person you say you want to be. But that's not how growth works. This is what real maturity actually is. Psychological maturity isn't confidence. It's not intelligence. It's not toughness or motivation. Maturity is the moment you stop outsourcing your life. The moment you stop treating your problems like they belong to someone else to solve. It's the moment you stop hoping the universe will notice your suffering and reward you for it like a movie ending. Reality doesn't work that way. Pain doesn't earn prizes. Time doesn't feel sorry for you. And the world doesn't care how unfair things have been, because unfairness doesn't come with instructions. This isn't me trying to sound dramatic. This is me trying to give you one of the most freeing sentences you can ever accept. Because the second you truly accept that no one is coming, you stop waiting. And when you stop waiting, something powerful happens. You become dangerous in the best possible way. You become the kind of person who doesn't need perfect conditions. The kind of person who can move through discomfort without turning it into a personal tragedy. The kind of person who doesn't need someone to hold their hand just to do what they already know. They should be doing so. Hear this as a line in the sand. Not as a motivational quote, but as a decision. Your health is your responsibility. Your money is your responsibility. Your mindset is your responsibility. Your habits are your responsibility. Your emotional control is your responsibility, even if you didn't create every problem you're facing. You are the one living with them, and that means you're also the only one who can end them. If that realization makes you feel a little angry, good. Anger is energy. Just don't waste it blaming the past. Use it to break the spell. Use it to stand up and walk out of the waiting room. Stop living like a child who expects someone to arrive with answers. Start living like an adult who builds answers through action. And now, we're going to move straight into the first truth you need to swallow, because this entire transformation begins with one brutal realization. If page 1 was about accepting that no one is coming, then this next part explains why so many people keep waiting anyway. You were fed a comforting lie. And the reason that lie is so dangerous is because it doesn't sound like a lie at all. It sounds like hope. It sounds like optimism. It sounds like, don't worry, things will work out. But for a lot of people, that phrase isn't a mindset. It's a sedative. It's the story they tell themselves so they can stay asleep while life keeps moving forward without them. From a very young age, you were surrounded by a specific kind of narrative. The weak get rescued. The broken get rewarded. The misunderstood get discovered. The suffering eventually gets compensated. Somewhere, somehow, a moment arrives when the universe finally says, "You've been through enough. Let me fix this for you." And even if you don't consciously believe that story anymore, it still gets into you, quietly, subtly. It trains your nervous system to wait for a turning point that was never earned. It teaches you that your job is to endure, and someone else's job is to deliver the happy ending. Then you grow up, and the story doesn't disappear. It just changes costumes. Now it's not a prince or a superhero. It's a boss who finally recognizes your value. It's a relationship that finally heals your wounds. It's a sudden globe that fixes your confidence. It's a viral moment that gives you status. It's a new routine that magically makes you disciplined. It's next Monday. It's next month. It's when things calm down. It's that imaginary version of life where the conditions are finally perfect. And you, at last, become the person you keep promising you'll be. But here's the problem no one warns you about. That story creates a hidden contract in your mind. A contract you never signed, yet somehow you live by it. The contract says, if I suffer long enough, I deserve a reward. If I've been through a lot, life should be easier for me. If I'm a good person, things should eventually fall into place. If I keep waiting, something will arrive that makes action feel natural. But reality never signed that contract. Reality doesn't look at your pain and calculate what you're owed. Reality doesn't care how unfair your childhood was. Reality doesn't care that you tried before and failed. Reality isn't cruel, because cruelty implies intention. Reality is indifferent, and that's what makes it so clean and so brutal. Indifference means there's no villain to defeat and no hero to arrive. There's just you, standing where you are, and what you choose to do next. This is why some people stay stuck for years while still feeling like they're trying. Because they confuse emotional struggle with progress. They confuse thinking about change with actual change. They confuse talking about healing with healing. They confuse surviving with building, and every time they feel overwhelmed, they return to the same comfort. One day, something will happen, as if life is a slot machine, and they just need to keep pulling the lever long enough. So let me make this painfully practical. If you're waiting to feel motivated before you work, you're waiting to be saved. If you're waiting for confidence before you put yourself out there, you're waiting to be saved. If you're waiting for someone to validate you before you take yourself seriously, you're waiting to be saved. And if you're waiting for the right time to start fixing your body, your finances, or your mind, then you're not planning. You're postponing. You're delaying responsibility with polite words. The mature truth is much simpler. Nothing changes because you deserve it. Things change because you do the uncomfortable work long enough, consistently enough, that reality has no choice but to respond. Not because it loves you, not because it finally noticed you, but because action creates consequence. And discipline has a compounding effect that doesn't care who you are or what you've been through. And I know there's a part of you that wants to argue right now, a part that wants to say, but you don't understand what I went through. Maybe I don't, and maybe no one ever fully will. But here's what I do understand. Whatever happened to you, you're the one living in your body. You're the one waking up to your mornings. You're the one carrying your thoughts, your habits, your patterns. And if you keep holding on to the lie that someone or something is supposed to make this easier for you, you will lose years quietly, not in a dramatic collapse, not in a single moment of failure, but in a slow decay. You get older, you get tired, you get used to disappointment, and one day you start calling it reality. So we're going to break that lie right now. Not with anger, but with clarity. You are not owed a rescue. You are not owed a turning point. You are not owed understanding. You are not owed motivation. The only thing you are guaranteed is time passing. That's it. Everything else, strength, peace, discipline, confidence, money, skill, self-respect, has to be built like a structure, brick by brick, with your own hands. And once you truly accept that, something shifts. You stop waiting for a miracle, and you start becoming one. Not in a magical sense, in the only sense that actually matters. You finally take control. Now, with that lie exposed, we have to confront the next truth. Because the reason people cling so tightly to the rescue fantasy isn't ignorance. It's something far more uncomfortable. Victimhood has benefits. That's the part nobody wants to admit because it sounds ugly. Because it threatens the identity you've been using just to survive. But if we're serious, if this video is really about growth and not comfort, then we have to say it clean. That the victim role pays you. Not in money, but in relief, in excuses, in a story that protects you from the most terrifying responsibility on earth, the responsibility of being the author of your own life. When you're the victim, you don't have to be the one who failed. You don't have to be the one who didn't follow through. You don't have to be the one who kept choosing the easy path. You can point outward. You can name the villains. You can list the reasons. You can collect evidence. And here's the trap: much of it might be true. Victimhood doesn't require you to lie. It only requires you to stop at the part of the truth that keeps you powerless. Because this is what victimhood really is. A way to avoid risk. A way to avoid judgment. A way to avoid the shame of trying and not being immediately great. It's a way to avoid changing your habits, because changing habits means admitting your old habits were quietly destroying you. And that admission hurts. It's easier to call your situation unfair than to call your behavior inconsistent. It's easier to say, "They ruined me," than to say, "I've been avoiding the work." It's easier to say, "I'm broken," than to say, "I've been comfortable." And let me be clear, I'm not saying you weren't hurt. I'm not saying you weren't betrayed, neglected, humiliated, or dragged through things you didn't deserve. I'm saying something colder and more useful. Pain is not permission to stay small. Pain explains you. Pain does not excuse you. If anything, pain is the very reason you can't afford to live asleep anymore. And the victim role gives you something else most people don't want to admit. It gives you attention. When you're the victim, People gather around your story. They listen. They validate it. They comfort you. They say, you didn't deserve that. And again, maybe you didn't. But what happens next? You slowly become loyal to the identity that gives you comfort. You become addicted to being understood. You start repeating the story, refining the story, polishing the story. You tell it again with better words, sharper details, deeper emotion, because the story has become a home. A dark home, maybe, but still a home. And the cost of that home is brutal. You don't move, because movement would threaten the story. If you suddenly became disciplined, the story would lose its power. If you suddenly got healthy, the story would have to change. If you suddenly built a strong life, you'd be forced to confront a painful possibility that you could have started earlier. For many people, that realization is unbearable, so they stay in victim because it keeps the past from feeling wasted. It gives the suffering a purpose. It lets them say, at least my pain means something. But pain doesn't need to mean something to be real. It doesn't need to be poetic. It doesn't need to be justified. It needs to be processed and then transformed into action. That's maturity. Not pretending it didn't happen, not denying it, but refusing to let it become your entire personality. Now listen closely, because this is where growth becomes violent in a good way. Violent against illusion. The victim mindset always asks the same question: who did this to me? And that question can be useful for a moment. Maybe for understanding, maybe for closure. But if you keep living there, it becomes a prison, because the only question that builds a future is this: what am I going to do about it now? That's the shift. The victim asks for a savior. The mature person builds a system. The victim waits for rescue. The mature person takes ownership. The victim collects blame like evidence in a courtroom. The mature person collects habits like weapons. And yes, blame feels good. That's why people use it. Blame is emotional anesthesia. It numbs the pain of responsibility. It lets you feel righteous while staying stuck. It's a drug. And like any drug, it works until it ruins you. So here's the test I want you to sit with, honestly, without performing for anyone. If your life stayed exactly the same for the next year, who would you blame? Who is your favorite target? The easiest person, the easiest system, the easiest excuse to point at so you don't have to point at yourself. Because the moment you see that clearly, you'll also see what victimhood really is. A strategy, and a losing one. Now we move into the next chapter, and it's going to sting, because it removes the last layer of denial. If victimhood has benefits, then something else has to be true as well. And this is the brutal mirror most people avoid. You've been choosing more than you admit, and I need you to hear that in the right tone. This isn't an insult. It's a door. It's the first honest doorway back to power. But it will sting, because it removes the most convenient illusion a human being can carry. The illusion that your life is mostly happening to you. Yes, things happened to you. Yes, some of it was unfair. Yes, some of it was out of your control. But if you look closely, really closely, most of your current life wasn't built from one big tragedy. It was built from 1,000 small votes. Quiet votes. Daily votes. Votes you cast with your habits, with your attention, with what you tolerate, with what you delay, with what you avoid, with what you feed, and with what you slowly starve. Nobody wakes up one morning and accidentally becomes undisciplined. You practice being undisciplined. Nobody accidentally becomes anxious all the time. You practice avoidance and then call it safety. Nobody accidentally ends up broke, out of shape, low on confidence, and stuck in the same loops year after year. It isn't bad luck. It isn't a mystery. It's a pattern that got repeated so often it eventually started to feel like identity. And this is the brutal mirror. You've been choosing comfort more than growth. Not because you're weak, but because comfort is immediate and growth is delayed. And most people are trained from the very beginning to worship what's immediate. You've been choosing distraction over discomfort, the easy hit over the hard climb, later over now, and later is the most expensive word in the human language because it steals years while sounding harmless. So look at how this shows up in real life. You say you want a different body, but you keep choosing the same food, the same skipping, the same "I'll start tomorrow." You say you want more money, but you choose scrolling over skill building, impulse buying over investing, complaining over learning. You say you want peace, but you keep choosing arguments, gossip, chaos, and draining relationships because loneliness scares you more than stress. You say you want confidence, but you choose hiding. You choose postponing. You choose waiting until you feel ready, when confidence only ever shows up after you do the thing, while you're not ready. And here's the part most people hate. These choices don't feel like choices. They feel like moods. They feel like, I'm tired. They feel like, I had a long day. They feel like, it's been rough lately. They feel like, I deserve a break. And you do deserve rest. But what most people call rest is actually escape. And escape is still a vote. It's a vote for the life you already have. This chapter is about stripping away that soft language. Because soft language creates soft lives. If you keep saying, I'm trying, but your actions never change, then trying is just the word you're using to avoid accountability. If you keep saying, I don't have time, but you somehow have hours for entertainment, then it's not a time problem. It's a priority problem. If you keep saying, I'm not motivated, what you really mean is, I'm not willing to feel discomfort. And that's not a motivation issue. That's a maturity issue. Now, I want you to see something important, because this is where people often get it wrong. They hear a message like this and fall into self-hatred. They start attacking themselves. They start saying, I'm pathetic. I ruined everything. That's not strength. That's just another excuse wearing a different costume. Because self-hatred can become a drama that replaces action. You don't need to hate yourself. You need to stop lying to yourself. The power is in clarity. The power is in being able to say, calmly and honestly, I've been choosing this. Because the moment you admit you've been choosing it, you also admit you can choose differently. That's the whole point. If your life is only happening to you, then you're trapped. But if your life is even partially shaped by your choices, then you're not trapped at all. You might be undisciplined. You might be distracted. You might be afraid. You might be untrained. But those things are fixable. They're trainable. They're solvable. So here's the question that cuts through the fog. And I want you to answer it quietly, without performing for anyone. Not for me. For you, what is the one area of your life where you keep saying, it's not my fault, but deep down, you know you've been participating. Participating through avoidance. Participating through tolerance. Participating through excuses. Participating through inconsistency. So ask yourself, calmly and clearly, Where have you been voting against your own future? That answer isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to locate the steering wheel again. It's meant to remind you that the wheel never disappeared. You just weren't holding it. And now we move into the next chapter. Because once you see that you've been choosing more than you admit, there's only one move left if you actually want to grow. One move that ends the negotiation, ends the excuses, ends the waiting room mindset. Radical ownership, no more bargaining. Radical ownership, no more bargaining. This is where the childish part of the mind panics, because it wants a loophole. It wants a special case. It wants an exception that lets you stay comfortable while still calling yourself serious. Radical ownership kills that fantasy. It doesn't care how you feel about the truth. It only cares about what the truth produces. So here is the rule, said clean, without decoration. Even when it's not your fault, it is your problem. And I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because it's the only stance that actually gives you power. If you keep waiting for the people who cause the damage to also fix the damage, you will wait forever. If you keep demanding fairness from life before you act, you will never act. If you keep searching for the perfect explanation before taking responsibility, you'll spend your entire life collecting reasons and calling it growth. Radical ownership is the decision to stop arguing with reality. You stop negotiating with should, have. You stop making your future dependent on your past being different. You stop making your progress dependent on someone apologizing. You stop acting like closure is required before you can build. Because closure is not a gift someone hands you. Closure is a door you close yourself. Let's bring this down to the ground. Radical ownership sounds big, but it shows up in very small moments. You feel anxious. The old you says, someone needs to calm me down. The mature you says, this is my nervous system. I'm going to regulate it right now. You feel broke. The old you says, the system is rigged. Maybe it is. The mature you says, fine. What skill increases my income? What habit stops the bleeding? You feel disrespected. The old you says, they need to change. The mature you says, then I change what I allow. I change what I accept. I change what I participate in. You feel stuck. The old you says, I need motivation. The mature you says, motivation is optional. Movement is not. Radical ownership doesn't deny reality. It uses reality. It's not everything is my fault. It's everything is my responsibility. There's a difference. Fault is about blame. Responsibility is about control. Fault keeps you trapped in the past. Responsibility gives you a future. And this is where your life actually starts changing. Not in theory, not in quotes, but in practice. Because the moment you take responsibility, you stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop waiting for someone to understand you. You stop needing the world to be gentle with you before you allow yourself to become strong. But here's what most people don't understand. Radical ownership is not a motivational mood. It's a standard, a law, a way of living. And the world will test it immediately. The moment you decide, I'm responsible, life will throw chaos at you. Bad days, stress, setbacks, disrespect, uncertainty, and you'll feel the old reflex come back. If radical ownership is tested in chaos, then this is where most people reveal whether they actually live it. Blame, avoidance, complaining, why me? that reflex shows up fast when things go wrong. And this is the truth most people miss. Radical ownership is not what you say on a good day. It's what you do in that exact moment. So here's the hard mental shift that makes this real. Stop asking, whose fault is this? Start asking, what's the next action? Because fault is a conversation. Next action is a weapon. Fault keeps you talking. Action keeps you building. And there's another reason people avoid radical ownership. Because once you truly own it, you lose your excuses. If you say, my life is my responsibility, you can't hide behind your past anymore. You can't hide behind your mood. You can't hide behind your environment. You can't hide behind your personality type. You can't hide behind unfairness. You can still acknowledge those things, but you can't worship them. This is why radical ownership feels like pressure. Because it is. It's the pressure of adulthood. It's the pressure of saying, I don't get to be a passenger in my own life. And yes, that's heavy. But it's also clean. It's simple. It's honest. Now here's the reward. Because there is one, and it shows up immediately. When you take ownership, you stop being confused. Confusion usually comes from trying to control what you don't control. Radical ownership cuts through that noise. It tells you exactly where your energy belongs, what you can actually change, your habits, your decisions, your standards, your effort, your responses, your skills, your discipline. Once you do that, you stop needing a savior. Because you become one in the only way that matters. You start rescuing yourself through behavior. Now we have to move into the next chapter. Because radical ownership is a decision, but holding it requires a specific skill set. If you don't build that skill set, you'll keep collapsing back into waiting, back into seeking comfort from the outside. That skill set is psychological reparenting. Becoming the adult in your own life. If you don't reparent yourself, you will keep looking for a parent. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a diagnosis of how many adults quietly live. They're grown on paper, but emotionally, they're still outsourcing basic stability. They're still searching for someone to regulate them, someone to reassure them, someone to give them permission, someone to push them, someone to tell them what to do next. And when that person doesn't appear, they feel abandoned. They shut down. And they call it life. This is what psychological maturity actually demands. You become the adult in your own life. Not in a motivational way, in a practical way. Because nobody is going to consistently calm your nervous system. Protect your boundaries, structure your days, manage your impulses, and keep your standards high. That's not coming. That job is yours. Reparenting comes down to two skills. And if you don't build them, you will stay vulnerable to the world. Self-soothing and self-command. Self-soothing is the part most people misunderstand. They think it means being nice to yourself, taking it easy, giving yourself a break. And sometimes, yes, that's part of it. But real self-soothing is regulation. It's the ability to calm panic without running to distraction. It's the ability to feel discomfort without immediately escaping it. After learning how to become the adult in your own life, the next challenge is learning how to stay with yourself when emotions hit. Hard because real self-soothing is not about escaping the storm. It's about sitting right in the middle of it and not doing something stupid just to feel better for a moment. The childish version of you reacts the same way every time it feels bad. It reaches. It reaches for the phone. It reaches for food. It reaches for another person. It reaches for attention. It reaches for anything that promises quick relief, anything that makes the feeling disappear. But here's the problem. That reflex doesn't heal pain. It trains pain. It teaches your brain that every time discomfort shows up, you must run. And over time, your entire life quietly gets built around avoidance. Avoiding hard feelings, avoiding responsibility, avoiding growth. Reparenting steps in and says no. When you feel bad, you don't abandon yourself anymore. You stay, you breathe, you slow things down. You take the sharp edge off the emotion without burning down your future just to feel okay right now. And once you can do that, the second skill comes into play, self-command. This is where many people collapse because they want comfort without leadership. But you cannot build a strong life with a weak inner authority. Someone has to be in charge. And if your mood is in charge, you're finished. If your impulses are in charge, you're finished. If your cravings are in charge, you're finished. Self-command means you become capable of giving yourself a clear order and actually following it. Not 5 orders. Not a long emotional speech. One simple, direct, non-negotiable instruction. You don't say, "I need to change my life." That's vague. That's dramatic. You say, "I'm going to do this next," and then you do it. Even if your mind complains the entire time. That's adulthood. At this stage, you stop negotiating with yourself like you're a committee full of conflicting opinions. You step into leadership. And here's a hard truth most people avoid. Many adults are addicted to being emotionally rescued. They want someone to say, "It's okay. You don't have to do it today." And sometimes, yes, that kind of mercy is real and necessary. But most of the time, that voice isn't mercy. It's weakness wearing a warm tone. Reparenting gives you a stronger form of mercy. The kind that says, "I know this is hard. I know you're tired. I know you're scared. But we're still doing the next right thing." Not everything, just the next right thing. And that's how you slowly build trust with yourself. You don't build self-esteem by repeating affirmations in the mirror. You build it by becoming reliable, by proving again and again that you won't abandon yourself when life gets uncomfortable. And once you do that, something shifts deep inside. You stop craving external approval the same way. You stop clinging to people just to feel stable. You stop chasing reassurance like it's oxygen, because you become your own source of stability. This chapter matters because it's the bridge. Radical ownership says, "It's on me." Reparenting teaches you how to carry that weight without collapsing under it. And now, the next chapter sharpens the blade even further. Because even after you start reparenting yourself, there's still one enemy that tries to grab the steering wheel every single day. Your mood, your feelings, the belief that you should only act when you feel ready. So now we confront it directly. Mood is not an authority. Mood is not an authority. That sentence alone can change your entire life. Because most people don't realize they've been living under a quiet dictatorship. And the dictator is whatever they feel in the moment. Tired, anxious, unmotivated, offended, overwhelmed, bored, uncertain. Every time that feeling shows up, it decides what happens next. Which means your future is being managed by the most unstable system imaginable. Here's the childish formula. I act when I feel like it. It sounds harmless. It even sounds honest. But it's the fastest way to build a life you don't respect. Because feelings are not designed to protect your destiny. They're designed to protect your comfort. They're short-term, reactive, shaped by sleep, sugar, stress, and whatever someone said to you 5 minutes ago. When mood stops being the authority, something important begins to shift. And this is where psychological maturity truly shows itself. Because if you let your feelings lead, you don't just slow down. You become a passenger in your own life. Psychological maturity is when you flip that formula. You don't ignore your feelings. You simply stop obeying them. You listen to them the same way you listen to the weather. You notice the information, you acknowledge it, and then you decide anyway. Think about what waiting to feel ready really means. It means you're waiting for a version of life where discomfort disappears, and that version doesn't exist. The real world doesn't hand out clean days. It gives you imperfect mornings, noisy thoughts, awkward emotions, and responsibilities that don't care what mood you woke up in. So if your rule is, I'll start when I feel good, what you're really doing is promising yourself that you'll never start. This is why people stay stuck for years, while still feeling logical about it. They say, I'm not motivated. What they really mean is, I don't want to feel discomfort, they say. I'm overwhelmed. What they really mean is, I want a guarantee before I move, they say. I'm tired. And sometimes, yes, they truly are. But the deeper issue is this. They've trained themselves to treat tiredness as a veto, not as a condition. A mature person doesn't romanticize discipline. They just understand a simple law. You do not rise to the level of your intentions. You fall to the level of your standards. And standards are not feelings. Standards are decisions you follow on days that don't feel inspirational, impressive, or easy. So here's the shift that makes this real. You stop asking, do I feel like it? And you start asking, what does the person I'm trying to become do next? Not for the next 2 hours, not for the whole day, just next, one move. One clean move you can execute even while your mind complains. And make no mistake, your mind will complain. It always does. It's built to conserve energy. It's built to avoid pain. It's built to keep you safe, not to make you great. So if you've been waiting for your mind to become supportive before you act, you've been waiting for a liar to suddenly become honest. That moment isn't coming. This is also where many people confuse kindness with weakness. They think being mature means being gentle with themselves all the time. But real maturity is balanced. You give yourself understanding, but you don't give yourself escape. You acknowledge reality, but you don't worship it. You can say, I'm exhausted, and still take the next step. You can say, I'm anxious, and still make the call. You can say, I'm sad, and still keep your promise. That isn't cruelty. That's self-respect. And notice how clean this makes your life. When mood stops being the leader, your days become predictable. Not easy, predictable. You stop living in chaos. You stop letting emotional waves decide whether you keep your word. And when you keep your word, even in small ways, something deeper begins to form. Not fake confidence built on hype or motivation. Real confidence. The kind that comes from reliability. The kind that quietly whispers, I don't need to feel ready. I just do what I said. And now, here's the part that ties directly back to the title. When you finally accept that no one is coming to save you, something becomes very clear. You no longer get to wait for your mood. Because mood, at its core, is just you asking for a rescue from the inside. It's you saying, I need to feel better first. But life doesn't wait for your emotional permission. Bills don't wait. Time doesn't wait. Consequences don't wait. So maturity becomes choosing to move while the feeling is still there, not after it disappears. Not once you feel confident, calm, or inspired. While it's still uncomfortable, that's the real upgrade. And once you accept this, once you stop treating mood like a boss giving orders, you're ready for the next step. And this next part may sound harsh, but it's actually freedom. You are going to pay a price either way. There is no escape from that. The only question is when and what kind of pain you choose to pay. The clean pain you choose deliberately, or the messy pain you inherit by default. You will pay a price either way. That's not pessimism. That's the law. And a mature person stops arguing with laws. They don't negotiate with gravity. They don't complain that fire is hot. They learn how reality works, and they move accordingly. The same rule applies here. Every good life costs something. The only choice you truly have is whether you pay that cost up front, on purpose, like an adult, or whether you pay it later, by force. After years of refusal to grow. Most people don't understand this because they've been trained to chase comfort as if comfort were the goal. So they avoid the hard conversation, and then they live inside a hard relationship. They avoid the hard workout, and then they live inside a hard body. They avoid the hard budget, and then they live inside constant financial stress. They avoid discipline, and then they live inside regret. They keep refusing the clean pain, and life keeps handing them the messy pain. Clean pain is the discomfort you choose. It's simple. It's direct. It's honest. It looks like waking up when you don't want to, moving your body when you'd rather scroll, doing the task you've been avoiding, telling the truth you've been hiding, practicing a skill instead of escaping into entertainment. Clean pain feels sharp in the moment, like a quick cut, but it leaves no poison behind. It doesn't damage your self. In fact, it builds it. Messy pain is the discomfort you don't choose. It's anxiety at midnight because you've been procrastinating for months. It's resentment because you tolerated disrespect for too long. It's humiliation because you kept talking about goals you never executed. It's the slow, quiet sadness of realizing you've been promising yourself change for years, and nothing is different. Messy pain doesn't arrive in one dramatic moment. It arrives quietly, like rust. It eats your time. It eats your confidence. It eats your sense of possibility. This is why the title matters. No one is coming to save you from the price. Nobody is going to pay it for you. Nobody is going to carry your consequences. Nobody is going to absorb the cost of your avoidance. You can hand people stories. You can hand them reasons. You can hand them explanations. None of that removes the bill. The bill always comes to you. So the question becomes almost insulting in its simplicity. Which pain do you want? The pain of discipline or the pain of regret? The pain of training or the pain of staying weak? The pain of honesty or the pain of living a lie? The pain of focus or the pain of distraction slowly turning into emptiness? People hear this and think the goal is to suffer. But that's not the point at all. So no, the goal was never to suffer for the sake of suffering. The goal is to suffer intelligently. Because the truth is, you're already in pain one way or another. No one gets a pain-free life. The real difference is whether that pain is building you or quietly breaking you down. And this is where you have to stop thinking purely in emotions and start thinking in math. Avoidance has interest. It compounds. Every week you delay, the fear doesn't stay the same, it grows. Every month you delay, the habit tightens its grip. Every year you delay, the identity hardens, like concrete setting in place. That's why change feels heavier the longer you wait. Not because you're doomed, not because you missed your chance, but because you've been paying the wrong price for too long. This is where a mature person makes a sharp, almost violent mental decision. I will choose my pain. Not every pain. Not a life of misery. Just the specific discomfort that actually buys freedom. Because that's the truth nobody likes to say out loud. Freedom isn't free. Freedom is purchased. It's purchased with early mornings when you'd rather stay in bed. It's purchased with boundaries that make people uncomfortable. It's purchased with saying no when yes would be easier. It's purchased with repetition, with doing the same boring, unglamorous things long after the excitement wears off. It's purchased by becoming the kind of person who can tolerate discomfort without turning it into drama. And here's the part that hits emotionally if you're honest with yourself. A lot of people don't just want to be saved from discomfort. They want to be saved from accountability. Because once you choose the clean pain, you can't keep your old story. You can't keep saying, I'm trying. You can't keep saying, I would, but you become someone who does. And the ego hates that at first, because the ego prefers excuses over evidence. So this chapter becomes your line in the sand. You stop pretending you can build a great life with no cost. You stop pretending motivation is required. You stop pretending the future will somehow be kinder than the present. You accept the bill, and then, consciously, you choose the payment plan that leads to freedom. And now we have to move into the next chapter, because at this point, you might feel fired up, and that's good. But fire alone doesn't save you. Fire fades. What saves you is structure. What saves you is building a system that moves you forward even on your worst days. That's the next truth. Stop seeking witnesses. Stop seeking rescue. Build a self-rescue system. A system is what carries you when your emotions won't. Because motivation is a liar. It shows up when it's convenient, then disappears the moment your day gets heavy. And if you keep believing you need to feel ready before you move, you'll keep repeating the same cycle. Big promises, strong speeches, a fresh start, then silence, then shame, then another restart. A mature person ends that cycle by building structure that works even when the mind is loud and messy. And this is where the rescue fantasy hides again, just wearing a different mask. Some people stop waiting for a person to save them and start waiting for a mood to save them. They think, if I can just find the right routine, the right book, the right plan, the right advice, then I'll finally be consistent. But consistency is not found. It's built, and the way you build it is brutally unglamorous. You design your days so your future no longer depends on how you feel today. Let me say it simply. A system is a set of rules you follow, even when you don't want to. And the best systems are almost insulting in how basic they are. Not because they're weak, but because they're enforceable. Most people fail because they build fantasy systems that require superhero energy. They design a perfect schedule they can only follow on their best day. And real life doesn't give you best days very often. And this is exactly where most people break their own momentum. They miss one day, just one, and the whole plan collapses. Then they label themselves undisciplined, lazy, hopeless. But the truth is, they're not undisciplined at all. They're just unrealistic. A real self-rescue system works in the opposite direction. It assumes you will have bad days. It assumes you will feel tired, distracted, unmotivated. It assumes your mind will try to negotiate. It assumes life will interrupt you repeatedly. And instead of fighting that reality, it builds around it. So what does that actually look like in real life? You choose non-negotiables that are small enough to survive chaos. Not 10 habits, not a perfect routine. 1 or 2 anchors, something so basic that even on your worst day, you can still do it. Because if you do that one thing, your identity stays intact. Your self-respect stays intact. Your direction stays intact. The real goal isn't perfection. The real goal is to never fully collapse back into the old version of you. This is where discipline is misunderstood again. People think discipline means maximum output, pushing hard every single day. No, discipline means minimum standards that never break. It means you don't let your worst day become a 0 day. Because 0 days are dangerous. Zeros don't just pause progress. They train quitting. And now we come straight back to the title. When no one is coming to save you, you need a system that saves you from your own weakness. A system that protects you from your own excuses. A system that catches you when your mind starts begging for comfort. And every effective system has 3 elements. Always first triggers. You attach habits to moments that already happen. You don't rely on memory. You don't rely on motivation. You use reality as the cue. When I wake up, I do this. When I finish work, I do this. When I feel stress rising, I do this. That's maturity. Turning chaos into patterns you can repeat. Second, friction. You remove the easy path to self-sabotage. You make the bad habit inconvenient. You don't pretend you'll resist temptation forever. You design your environment so resistance becomes unnecessary. You stop treating self-control like a personality trait and start treating it like engineering. And third, a reset rule. Because you will mess up. You will slip. And the difference between a child and an adult isn't that the adult never fails. It's that the adult knows how to restart without drama. They don't spiral into shame. They don't punish themselves for being human. They reset quickly. They return to the standard. They don't turn one mistake into a new identity. And this is where psychological maturity becomes visible. A mature person doesn't romanticize their plan. They protect it. They don't announce it. They don't seek witnesses. They don't keep looking for reassurance that it will work. They quietly execute the system until the results speak for themselves. Because seeking witnesses is just another form of rescue. It's borrowing belief from other people. It's needing applause in order to continue. And the problem with that is simple. When the applause stops, you stop. When the attention fades, you fade. That's not growth. That's performance. A self-rescue system is private. It's boring. It's repetitive. And that's exactly why it works. It removes the need for drama. It removes the need for a big emotional moment. It makes progress almost inevitable because it no longer depends on how you feel. And now we reach the final chapter. The paradox that makes all of this worth it. Because when you truly accept that no one is coming, when you stop begging for rescue, when you build your own system, something strange starts to happen. You don't feel abandoned anymore. You feel free. And that's where we end this episode, with the freedom of no rescue. When you finally accept that no one is coming to save you, something inside you goes quiet. Not the quiet of sadness, Not the quiet of giving up, but the quiet of clarity. The kind of quiet that arrives when you stop arguing with reality. When you stop begging life to be different before you begin. It's a strange kind of peace, because it doesn't come from comfort. It comes from truth. Most people fear this truth. They imagine it will make them lonely. They picture it like a cold room, like abandonment, like being left behind with no one watching. But that fear is built on the same fantasy we've been dismantling this entire episode. The fantasy that your stability, your strength, your direction is supposed to come from outside of you. Once that fantasy collapses, solitude stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like freedom, because you're no longer waiting. You're no longer looking over your shoulder. You're no longer hoping someone will finally notice you and hand you the life you want. You're building it. And that is one of the most adult sentences a human being can say. I'm building it. Waiting is a kind of slavery. It chains you to people, to timing, to moods, to circumstances, to the past, to the story of what should have happened. Waiting makes you powerless because it hands your future to something you cannot control. But ownership, real ownership, brings your future back into your hands. Even if your hands are shaking, even if you're scared, even if you're tired, at least they're your hands. This is why the title of this video isn't meant to be depressing. It's meant to be liberating. No one is coming to save you only feels dark when you still want to be a child. It becomes light the moment you decide to grow up, because it removes the most exhausting job on earth, trying to be rescued. Think about how much energy people waste trying to be saved. They try to be understood. They try to be validated. They try to be seen. They try to win sympathy. They try to convince others that their pain is real. They try to earn permission to take themselves seriously, and all of that is emotional labor with no return. It doesn't build the body. It doesn't build the bank account. It doesn't build discipline. It doesn't build self. It only builds a better story about why they haven't started. And the moment you stop doing that, you feel it. Freedom. Not a loud freedom. Not a dramatic freedom. A clean freedom. The freedom of not needing anyone to agree with you before you act. The freedom of not needing motivation to begin. The freedom of not needing the past to make sense before you move. The freedom of not needing a perfect plan before you take the next step. Because that's what maturity really is. It's not a personality. It's not a vibe. It's not a mindset you post online. It's a relationship with reality. It's choosing to live in the world as it is, not as you wish it would be, and building anyway. And now, let me leave you with one final image. One that locks this message into your nervous system. Imagine you've been standing on a battlefield, staring at the horizon, waiting for the cavalry. You keep telling yourself they're late. You keep checking the distance. You keep listening for the sound of hooves. You keep surviving, but you're not moving. And then the truth hits you. There is no cavalry. Not because you're cursed. Not because you're unworthy. But because this is your fight. And the moment you realize that, something changes. You stop waiting. You stop scanning the horizon. You look down. You grip your weapon. You take a breath and you move. That's not abandonment. That's adulthood. After everything we've talked about so far, the waiting, the disappointment, the quiet realizations, it all leads to this moment. A moment of clarity where there's nowhere left to hide. And right here, you are left with two choices. You can collapse into despair, sink into the weight of it all, and wait for something to save you. Or you can do the only truly mature thing left to do. You become the cavalry. You stop standing on the sidelines, scanning the horizon for help, and you step forward as the one who moves. You stop waiting for rescue, and you become the rescuer. You stop asking life to make you strong, and instead you train strength. Day by day, rep by rep, choice by choice. You stop asking for confidence, and you begin building evidence, small wins, kept promises, quiet proof that you can rely on yourself. You stop asking for peace, and you set standards. You draw lines. You decide what you will no longer tolerate from others and from yourself. You stop asking for a new life, and you start behaving like someone who actually deserves one. Not because the universe owes you anything, not because fate suddenly feels generous, but because you're finally doing the work that changes who you are. So here is the final line I want you to carry with you after this episode ends. Not as a motivational quote, not as something you nod to and forget, but as a standard you live by. No one is coming, and strange as it sounds, that is the best news of your life. Because it means your future is no longer sitting in someone else's hands. It's not waiting on permission, timing, or rescue. It's in yours. No one is coming to explain your life to you. No one is coming to heal you for you. No one is coming to build your discipline, protect your mind, fix your finances, restore your confidence, or give back the years you lost to waiting. No one is coming to undo the consequences of delay. And if that sentence still feels heavy in your chest, it's only because a part of you is still hoping reality will soften, bend, and become gentle. But reality doesn't bend. It doesn't negotiate. It responds. It responds to action, to standards, to repetition, to the quiet decisions you make when nobody is watching and no one is applauding. It responds when you show up on ordinary days, when motivation is low and excuses are loud. So let this be the end of the waiting room. Let it end tonight. Not with a dramatic transformation, not with a grand announcement, but with one clean move you can't talk yourself out of. One thing you've been avoiding. One promise you've been postponing. One habit that finally proves you're done negotiating with your potential. Because the only way this message becomes real is if you stop using it as inspiration and start using it as a command. You don't need a savior. You need a system. You need the ability to move forward even while your mind complains, doubts, or resists. And deep down, you already know what the next right step is. You've known it for a long time. The only difference now is this. You're no longer pretending someone else is coming to do it for you. Nobody is coming good. Stand up anyway.